Okay, just waiting for the clock to click over to 11:30. I think there's enough gap between sessions that we'll probably have most of the folks here with us right now, and anybody that joins in will be able to catch up. My name is Ellery. I'm the Field Chief Technology Officer for Radiant Logic. I want to thank you for joining me today, and hopefully I can explain to you why I chose such an odd title for Zero Trust and what the 4 C's are. If you've ever been diamond shopping, and I think most of us have at one point in our life, I did it once as a young gentleman, you quickly find out from the diamond salesman about the 4 C's. And the 4 C's of diamond shopping start out with carat, that's the size of the diamond. How much does it weigh? The cut, what does it look like? What's the shape? I went with a round diamond. I was a traditionalist. Color. Color is the pop of the diamond. It actually is what you have the first impression of. That's where I put all my money. A tiny little diamond with a flaw inside that was as bright as could be, because to me it looked like twice the diamond when it was on my wife's finger. And then clarity. How close is it to being perfect? And that's always an aspiration. There are, quote, flawless diamonds, but I think if you go with electron microscope, you'll still find that there are little flaws in there, but you're moving always towards something cleaner, something more clear, something without inclusions, as they call it in the diamond business. So these all actually apply to Zero Trust in the concepts of what we're looking at today. So what are the 4 C's in Zero Trust? And the key with Zero Trust is that we spend a lot of time thinking about policy decision points, policy enforcement points, being able to get applications and users and systems access to resources in a very low provisioning model with a very high level of security, but we forget about the fact that all those decisions to grant access rely on identity data. They rely on information, the policy information point. I saw a presentation on a roadmap from one of the access management companies about a week ago. Very interesting, very thorough on their examination and investment in Zero Trust, but with the assumption that the policy information point, all the data they would need to do their Zero Trust, was ubiquitously available at their fingertips, clean and ready to go. Well, clean is the first C in Zero Trust. I have to have my data clean. I have to have accurate information. I'm actually going to authorize access to resources in my network based on information, based on attributes and data. If the attributes aren't accurate, then none of my authorizations are accurate. I'm going to give inappropriate access to resources. I'm going to reduce security. But I also need to be able to correlate that data. If I ask my policy decision point to go 7 different places to gather 7 pieces of data, to aggregate it together, correlate that, and present that back to make a decision, every time the user makes a mouse click, that security model is going to be ripped out very quickly as the users revolt that they can't get their jobs done. I have to make something frictionless. To do that, I have to correlate my data. I have to bring it together so there's one place to go, one policy information point to grab all the details that I need across as many policy information or policy decision points as possible. And then I need to consume that data. I need to make that data available in a format, a structure, a schema, in a model that my policy engine can understand, that it can actually apply to the policies it's created. When I'm authoring policies, I need to be able to reach back to the policy information point and grab that data and make sure that I am authoring my policy on the same information that I'm going to evaluate it on. If I use one format for department naming to do authoring and a different format that happens to exist in the user profiles for authorization, I'm not going to get any authorizations on those policies. So I have to be able to map this data back into my systems as smoothly as possible, using as many standards as possible. And in the Zero Trust world, we're moving towards a correlation or a confluence of standards now, where we've got a couple left that I think that will be outstanding in the marketplace. And that's going to be also paramount, that you're able to put the information into a format that most vendors out of the box are going to understand. And then the most important piece is control, and this is the one we forget about most often. I can build all this, I can stand it up day one, it can be beautiful and pristine, my data is clean, all my policies are accurate, and I let it run, and a month later, 3 months later, 6 months later, everything is drifted. My data sources have changed. My information governance is not as strict as I want it to be. My policies are being adjusted and I'm getting unintended consequences. I need to be able to monitor and watch and see this data over time. This is a dynamic system. This isn't a build it and forget it platform. This is a build it, tune it, watch it, massage it, and improve it platform. Zero Trust is a journey. The actual policy information point data set is a journey. I'm building that information. I'm constantly cleaning it. I'm constantly enhancing it. And I have to be able to recognize change in the field that I can apply back to my system to make sure I have accurate data. But also catch unauthorized changes, because now I'm authorizing access based on an attribute. If I switch my title to CFO, I may get some amazing access to certain resources in the financial system. Not reasonable for me to do that, but if that kind of change is done, the impact it can have downstream can be dramatic. So I have to be able to control that and prevent any attack on the system that is simply just an attribute substitution. So where this all comes back to is a policy information point. And the reason I'm standing here is this is what Radiant Logic does. We are the foundation for Zero Trust. We are the policy information point. We're the guys on the ground with the concrete and the rebar and the plumbing pipes making everything work. The fancy pretty stuff upstairs where you're picking out kitchen cabinets and you're getting tile and all those choices, that's your access management layer. Those are your policy enforcement points. They're fun. I get to build policies. It's neat. It's drag and drop. We're the guys in the back making sure everything you need is there. The hot water's in the kitchen, the air conditioning works. We're the machine installation folks, but we're critical to the platform, and I need to make sure that it's correct, because if you don't put the foundation in right, everything you build upon it's going to be a problem. So we talk about Zero Trust. Well, I actually ran into Ian Glazier at Starbucks yesterday. I didn't plan on including him in my presentation until I did bump into him. He did a presentation at Gartner Catalyst we figured out 13 years ago on attribute-based access control and explaining what it was, and that everyone in the industry and his forecasting would be on attribute-based access control within the next 3 years. That was then would have been 12 years ago. We're now just approaching attribute-based access control. Zero Trust is driving access through attributes, but it has a lot of other names. You'll find people in your organization that look at Zero Trust and say, well, it's network segmentation, or it's my identity software-defined perimeter. I'm building an identity warehouse for my Zero Trust. I have identity-first security, which you'll hear out of Gartner. These are all saying the same thing, that I'm going to start using really granular information to make decisions about what access people have. But by any other name, it still secures your world. What we're building here is a security fabric. We're building a model to transform the way we do security. Because the old paradigm we used to work on was we built a big wall around our castle. We had locks on the doors. If I was inside the building, I was safe. I was behind the firewall. I was using internal applications. I couldn't bring things in and out of the building. I had a relative level of security built almost on a physical level. That's all disappeared. Today, we are working with a distributed workforce. Most of the applications you access are now hosted with SaaS vendors outside your organization. Data is coming in and out. You're working with partners and vendors. It's changed the paradigm. So now I have to secure the user. I have to secure the transaction. I have to get as close as possible to securing the endpoint, and I can't rely on an overarching security model or a firewall system or perimeter to protect me. Now, in this model, there's many places in the organization where I have policy engines, where I'm making decisions about my identity data. I have a running bet with someone in my organization that I can include an elephant in every presentation. So this is my elephant, and why is he here? Because Zero Trust is different to every person in the organization that's working with it. I spoke with someone yesterday, one of our customers, and I said, hey, what are you doing around Zero Trust? And his first question to me was, well, how do you define Zero Trust? And that's a great question. And this is the parable of the three blind men that come upon an elephant. One guy gets a leg and says an elephant's a tree. It's big, it's round, it's tall. I know what an elephant is. Another guy gets the trunk and thinks it's a snake. It's very wiggly and long. Another one gets the tail and says, no, it's just a simple little brush. It's in the eye of the beholder. Zero Trust plays many, many roles in the organization. There are many policy engines across network access, infrastructure, network segmentation, application, microservices, sidecars, access east-west within the organization. Plain ID and Immuta are doing filtered SQL queries with policy enforcement, so you can access databases and only get back a subset of data filtered and masked to fit your requirements. Endpoint authorization, and then identity is really where we're lagging in this space, because attribute-based access control on the identity side relies on applications externalizing authorization. So today, the investments are really over in the folks in Cisco and NetApp and Immuta and Plain ID, but you're starting to see now, as I talk to customers, a move towards externalizing authorization on the application side, being able to have not a set of roles and provisioning accounts into applications, but for net new applications for vendors and for our customers that build their own, is that external authorization, talking to a policy enforcement point, talking to a policy decision point. So at the bottom, you'll see every one of these segments of my world of zero trust relies on a policy engine. Gartner identified 23 different types of policy engines operating in the modern environment today. So there's a lot of machines out there consuming identity data in order to make a decision. And the key is the policy decision point is critical to feeding the data into the engine to make that decision. Think of this as fuel and the engine. Some engines need jet fuel, some engines need diesel, some engines need gasoline, but everybody needs information to make decisions. You can write policies, you can enforce intercepts on your applications and your endpoints, but if you don't have your system actually configured with the right data, you won't be able to get the system running. So let's define zero trust in a little more detail. It's a data-centric security model, and I keep coming back to that. It's attributes, it's information. It all comes back to looking at data to make a decision. And it eliminates the idea of trusted and untrusted networks. We're no longer relying on a hard-coded provisioning of access to you or on a system that I know is secure from external attack, because those systems are not existing anymore. I'm not provisioning access into a device or a person. I don't trust that process to be uncompromisable. If you're highly provisioned and your account is compromised, the amount of access that that bad operator has now is equivalent to everything you could do on the network. That's too much exposure today. So what we're shifting to is an attribute-based confidence level that enables authentication and authorization policies. So that's attribute-driven, multiple attributes. I can't just make a decision on title and department. That's not enough granularity to really decide what access you should have inside the financial system. I need to gather a lot more data about that platform. But I may have a scenario where the CFO is accessing the financial system on Saturday night at 2 in the morning from South Korea. Well, that's definitely a hard stop, right? That's never going to happen. Except that my travel system told me that my CFO is in South Korea. I've got recognition on the calendar that I'm reporting to Wall Street on Monday, so he has to be in there on Wednesday, and he's properly authorized, and I give him a step up because he's outside of my network parameters. And now it's a reasonable transaction to let him into that system and not get a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning from an irate CFO who says that you're making the business not work. So the ability to actually look at that granular data and make a really valued, accurate decision is critical. On top of the concept of least privileged access, I'm no longer going to provision you with everything you need. I'm going to provision you with just enough to get the door open. You're going to get into the building, but then if you want to do anything after that, you need to be authorized in real time by the policy engines. And this can be authorizing you just to get on the network. So I look to see where you're coming from, what device you're on, what time of day it is, how secure the connection is, whether your system is properly virus scanned and operating and patched, and I make decisions about where on the network you're trying to go, and then I authorize that decision. Or down to the application level, I can look and see where you're trying to go in the application next and decide whether that's a reasonable thing to do. So I think this is a pretty good definition. It was actually devised by the Department of Defense Digital Modernization Strategy Team. This is where we're seeing the bleeding edge of zero trust right now is in the DoD. Their CEO, the President of the United States, put a mandate out about 18 months ago saying that everyone had to be on zero trust by 2027 and implement multi-factor authentication. I don't know that he necessarily understood what the impact of that statement was, but he's got departments across the DoD running around like crazy, and they funded it, which is the other half of the puzzle in DoD. So there's a lot of work being done to figure this out, to sort this out, to build this out. Now, the idea of all this information getting into my policy engine, this is the typical PowerPoint conundrum. I can draw a green line there between two systems and assume that they easily talk to each other and everything works. That's not the nature. This data that I need to consume to make those decisions across all those systems is very disparate. Comes from different platforms, comes in different formats, comes in different structures. It may not have a common identifier for every user, so finding someone in one system and finding their corresponding data in another is not a simple point and click. So I need to bring in an identity data fabric. And again, I mentioned this is the reason Radiant Logic is here. This is what we provide. This is an engine we've been building for 20 years. It's kind of like it's been a solution in search of a problem of this scale. We've been doing very well providing authentication and authorization, but now that Zero Trust is coming forward, the need to be able to build, correlate, integrate, map this data, transform this complexity and chaos on the left into something actually actionable, into a policy information point you can leverage is critical. And that's the functions that Radiant Logic provides. Again, we're doing the dirty work. We're the guys cleaning out your garage. Nobody wants to clean their garage, but you have to get rid of your IT debt. You have to organize your information. You have to make things correlated. You got to match the paint and the carpet to make it all work. That's the work that we're doing on the platform. And once you've done that, now you can feed all this information easily into the policy engines. They can do their policy enforcement point, and across all those pillars in Zero Trust, you get an effective system that's operating today. So what are the 4 C's of Zero Trust? What do I want to focus on when I'm focusing on Zero Trust? Again, I want to look at cleaning my data. I need to make sure that data is accurate. I'm going to make decisions based on it. I need to make sure it's complete. If I'm doing something like looking at manager to authorize someone or to review their access and they don't have a manager, I can't complete that process. I can't actually make that information actionable and usable at that point. Whoops, that went a little fast. There you go. Correlating all the information back to that identity fabric, that engine that can bring all the information together. I have to associate and build a rich set of data, which means data comes from multiple places. I have to find a way to link it together so that your data in one platform that may be a database platform in HR, and your data in Active Directory, and your data in a device endpoint registration system, and your data in the training platform can all be brought together and can all be surfaced and formatted in a way that can be used as a single set of attributes and profiles. And then in consuming that data, we're moving again, as I said, towards more and more standards, and then control, keeping this information under control. So let me go a little deeper into each of those, because this is what builds your policy information point. This is what makes Zero Trust work. So if you think about these 4 things as you're building out your infrastructure, and you can tick all 4 of these boxes, you've got a pretty good system. So I'm going to correlate clean with caret. The caret weight of the diamond, cleaning your environment. Think of the weight. Think of the amount of IT debt you have. That's between you and a Zero Trust deployment. Now, Zero Trust is a journey, so it's not like you have to do it all tomorrow. This is an incremental process of going in and cleaning up my systems. But I need to look and see how much I actually have to attack. And that starts with seeing what I have, being able to actually get a sense of the scale and the size and the scope of the information I have. And this is an incremental system, so I'm going to add on data over time. I'm going to continue to enrich my profile with more information, so I need visibility into that data. And I need to be able to see the quality of that information to make the decisions on what can I clean, what can I assume about the data to be accurate, what do I not trust about my data, how do I move my data further and further down the road to be more and more trustable within my environment. The cut of the diamond, the shape, is correlation. How do I model my information? How do I get that data into a final shape that I can consume in my system, that everybody's going to understand, that my standards-based policy engines are going to look at that data and go, I see this information. It's something as simple as normalizing data. If I have 7 different ways that I've said VP of sales in my title in my organization, if I have to build a policy with 7 different variations on VP of sales, sales VP, v.p.sales, in order for all the ways that data may show up to be evaluated and all the right people to be authorized, that's a lot of weight. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of complexity, and the system waits to go through that. So what I do with the data layer is I normalize that data. I map everything to v.p of sales, and that's what I build my policy on. Regardless of what the back end looks like, when the user's evaluated, the policy information point will use the normalized value based on that translation of the data as it came from the back end of authority. So I don't have to tell my data owners they have to change what they're doing. They may love the way they spelled VP of sales, but I can normalize it so my policies are much more consistent, much more easy to use. And think about the makeup of the data, the schema, the protocol, the ways the data is being integrated. How am I using that information? How can I surface that information and make it available? And then I'm going to make that information data set as smooth and polished as I can. I want to create a unified data set so that my policy decision point, when it's authoring data, has all the drop downs it needs with all the data it needs fed from Radiant Logic. And when I'm evaluating that policy, the user profile, or the application profile, or the endpoint, or the bot, because this isn't just people. This is every object in the organization that needs to access a resource is being affected by a policy engine, and it has attributes that need to be included. That's one of the nice things about Radiant. We're Switzerland. We're platform agnostic. We will store data for any type of object. And we have a customer right now building out an object type for applications so they can register all their applications, and then under those applications, they can add member of to those applications of all the service accounts they use to access those applications, and under the service accounts, all the people that own those service accounts. So they're building a registration of application information because we can store that kind of data as you need to build it and bring it out. And then color is consuming. This is the pop. What's the first impression? How is it going to be used? Is it going to be easy to integrate? Is your access management system going to come back to you and say, I don't know what you gave me, I can't do anything with it? Or are they going to say, this was so easy, 10 minutes and we integrated and the data is already in the system and we're running? Real world examples, Cisco, AppGate, and others, it's a 10-minute process. We give them exactly what they need in the format they need it. It's all in one spot. They have one call to make. We can give it to them over REST, we can give it to them over SCIM, we can give it over LDAP, we can put it on a Kafka queue. There's a lot of ways to get to the information, so we can make it consumable and very easy to do. Does it give you a wow? Is this solve a big problem? Is this, oh my gosh, look how easy this is now? Because the scale of this problem can be monumental. I've had organizations who actually have purposely said, I'm not going to play in this space, it's too much. There's too much mess in the garage, I'm not going to deal with it, I'm going to keep the door closed and pretend it's not there, because it's too much to take on. It's a roadblock to everything we do. But if you can build this out, you actually change that from being a business disabler to a business enabler. We've had customers that have actually come back and said the transformation for the IT department from somebody that was the office of no to the office of sure thing, it can be done, and let me show you, has been monumental. So thinking about mounting it, what's it going to look like? How are you going to make it available to those policy engines again? And then compatibility. I want to make sure that everything works together. I want to make sure that if I have multiple policy information points, and in Radiant I can build multiple views of the data so I can tailor the information to each of the policy engines. Everybody gets a view or a version of what they're looking for and what they want. It's not one size fits all, because in our business one size never fits all, it only fits one thing. But everybody wants their own, so we can build that in a way that scales very effectively. And then again, control is critical. This is the one we don't think about, but data is going to drift. Things are going to change. Information is going to become more chaotic over time. It's entropy, it's natural physics, it's what happens. So I have to have a way of observing change. I have to recognize when something in my system changes. Is that an authorized change? Is it an unauthorized change? What do I do with that change? Because this data is now critical. It is the foundation of my security policies. Everything I do runs off of this data. So I have to be able to say with integrity this data is accurate. I have to be able to go back to the auditors and say, this is my policy. This is what my policy does. This is the data that it uses, and I can assure you that all three of those things are locked down so that someone can't come in and arbitrarily change information and get a different result. But I also want to audit the endpoints. I want to audit the results because, like ChatGTP, there was a lawyer recently who was doing an airline passenger suit. He asked ChatGTP for 4 cases that he could cite on airline and passenger suits that had gone a certain way. And he got back 4 examples that seemed really reasonable with citations and everything, and he quoted them in court, and the defense said, Your Honor, these are all fictitious. None of these exist. We looked them up on the system. It was made up by ChatGPT because it couldn't think of anything else to do. So you need to be very sure that the quality of the data you have is accurate, that it's not something that was generated at some point and hasn't been refined and re-examined and made sure that it is the proper information, especially as it changes over time. So know that things are going to shift. You need to be able to control them. So what I'm doing is I'm building an open, intelligent, real-time data platform for identity data. This is, again, all my sources of information on the left. It's a pipeline moving to the right. I'm going to gather and federate that data. I'm going to observe my information, clean it up, correlate it, build it together, refine it, make sure I understand it. I'm going to analyze that information and know what I have, know the relationships that I have, know the nature and dependencies of those pieces, because this is a giant sort of multi-geared swish watch of moving parts that all work together. So I have to be able to understand and analyze the way my different pieces impact each other in the system. And then I want to prescribe remediation. I want to be able to do cleanup. I want to be able to recognize change when it's not authorized and fix it. I want to fill in blanks and authorize access. I want to be able to get people the information they need at the policy information point. And ideally, as we move out more and more into machine learning and AI, and we start to bring more analytics into the product, I want to start doing predictions. I want to be able to do things like, say, look at a policy and say, this attribute change on this policy would affect all this downstream access. So this is the impact of this changing on this system. Or if I altered this policy by adding another parameter, this is the impact it has on all the things it's associated with. I need to be able to forecast what that policy does in my system, and then go out into the real world and measure the result and compare those two. Because again, unintended consequences are a normal part of any kind of system, but you need to be able to test for them and make sure you remediate them. And I want to make this information available to as many people in the organization as possible. We need to get more hands on this problem, because a lot of the stuff I'm doing in policies comes out of the business unit manager. They know what people need to access resources. They know what attributes about those users, what department are they in, what project are they in, what's their role, what's their title, what's their location, how does that all impact the systems they get access to that are built out. So I need to incorporate more people into that. My audit and compliance people, again, are critical on 2 halves. One, now I got to be able to prove to them this policy system is secure and it's accurate, because this is what they're looking at now. And this is a much more testable platform for review. Because if I'm doing policy-based access control, I can look at a user and say, I know that's his name. I know he works for me. I know he's in that department. I know that's his title. I know he's on these 3 projects. I know this is where he's located. I can verify this type of data because it's knowable information for a manager. Today, we ask managers to look at a list of 300 groups that have cryptic names that he doesn't understand and say, should John Smith retain access to all those groups? And the reaction is always, well, I don't know, but I'll say yes because that's the safest answer. And now I've just recertified access to all those groups for John Smith, and I have no idea whether they should have them or not. In the policy-driven model, I'm much closer to being able to make actual valid decisions about access and authorization because I know these things that build those policies. And all this goes out to the policy engines. All this delivers this to the front line. All the systems that are doing the work, the heavy lifting, the access control, they're going to get this information to run off it. It's a policy information pipeline that we're building out to make all this data available. And this is a flexible, expandable, living system. It's not a one-time static build. I add more sources of data. I add more policy requirements. The engine in the middle does all the work to connect those 2 worlds together. So one of the things in our industry that we've said, and I've really been happy with us as vendors, is that Zero Trust is not a product. Zero Trust is not a project. It's not a one and done. This is a journey. This is a transformation. It's a move forward into a new paradigm in securing a world that we don't have today, but starting with what you have already. Take a look at what you already have in your environment. Chances are you already have some policy engines running. The guys doing network segmentation and access from to the network from the outside, those are all policy engines. They may be doing something simple as, give me your user ID and password. If it's a valid password, I'm going to let you in. but they can start to enhance that with a lot more filtering, a lot more control, and they can actually start to decide what part of the network you go onto. Where you go on the network decides what applications you get access to. What applications you get access to starts to build that policy engine deeper and deeper into the system. So you want to start to build out a granular set of information for them. Have those conversations about what are you doing today, what's your roadmap to get to a real granular policy enforcement point. And then to find out what data they need to do that. If they need more data, if they need more granular information, where does it need to come from? And when we told the guys at Cisco, working with the NCCOE NIST project on Zero Trust, that we could actually provide them information as to whether or not an end user had had training on a particular application. So you can't get access to the SAP data entry system until you finish the SAP data entry training, which is information in the training platform that we can expose and put in a policy so that they can enforce that at the gate when you go to access SAP. They were thrilled because they're yearning for more granular enforcement. They want to be more relevant. They want to be able to do things like that and come back and say, we can control access based on training data. So that ability to let them know that we can give them more to work with, we can give them more data to build off of. And then find the authoritative sources for the information. What is the authoritative source for data? Is title only out of HR and is it accurate? Or is HR title what they got when they joined, and when they get a promotion, nobody tells HR because it doesn't affect payroll, so the title in HR is old now and the new one is in AD? You have to understand the nature of sources of truth, because you're going to build an aggregation of data. You need to know where to look to see the data that's actually accurate and actionable and that you want to be able to act on. So start your journey with what you have today. You've got applications, you have systems, you have platforms. You can start working on this today. You have data. You have places to go clean the information. You have the ability to start correlating data and see what a global profile for a user looks like. When I just start adding in 3 or 4 sources of data, I get a much richer set of data I can use today for authorizing access and make that information easily consumable. Again, everything we do at Radiant is out of the box. It's all mouse-driven. It's all command-line driven. So this is a very simple project. It's not a scaffold where developers are going to spend months trying to build this out of raw code. This is something you can get up and running very quickly and start to incrementally increase the value in it and get it connected. We can expose information to an AppGate or a Cisco front end in half an hour, and they can start building policies off a richer set of data immediately. And then really focus on control. Recognize that this is a paradigm shift in security. You need to have your eye on the ball. You need to be able to know that the data you're making decisions on is accurate and it's secure, and if it changes, it's an authorized change, and if it's an unauthorized change, you roll it back. And that's something that Radiant Logic is working on, building in that automated processes so that you can trust us as a security guard to be on the job for every attribute you're working on. And then basically, wash, rinse, repeat. You build it, you refine it, you use it, you enhance it, you add more, and it gets broader and broader, and you fill a bigger and bigger piece of the puzzle. So I want to thank you all for your time and your attention. I'm definitely open to any questions. Again, I'm Wade Ellery, the Chief Field Technology Officer for Radiant Logic, and thank you again. Any questions from anyone? No? Oh, yes.
In the script, you have mentioned about the schema, a uniform schema and format. Does the product offer that, or the clients have to build something in the format for the data consumption?
So schema is the structure the data appears in, and most systems have, you'll find most systems have their own schema, a relative type of schema. The thing that's nice about Radiant Logic is we're schema agnostic, so we can add your schema into a larger context of other data that has a schema, so we can extend the schema very flexibly and very easily. A lot of times we work with data in databases, which doesn't have any formatted schema structure. The database administrator created whatever field names he wanted. Those can be generated into a schema object, and that can then be used in that combination. So we can build out, and then we can remap that schema. So you may have a scenario where the data originally was F name and L name, and my policy information point wants to see it as first name and last name, because that's a schema it needs. we can easily map the data into that particular format and that schema. So coming in, we can absorb anything. Going out, we can remap to anything. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, yeah, sure. By all means. Thank you.
The near real-time data.
Yeah.
When a customer is in session and you want to capture near real-time data to pass it to them, how soon can that data be delivered?
So we're built for authentication authorization. Again, this is what we've been doing for 20 years. So we've been delivering real-time data. The real dependency is how fast the backend, a change on the backend system can be recognized. If there's automated change detection, like an Active Directory or Azure or a number of platforms where we know within a millisecond that an attribute changed, we'll recognize that change and we will propagate that change into Radiant Logic immediately. So it's a near real-time update to the data. So anytime you query Radiant for a question, it's going to be the data that reflects what the source was with as much accuracy as that source can provide. One of the key things, though, and you bring up a good point about change, I log into the system at noon. I get an authorization token because all my data looks good. I take my token, and at 12:30, I'm still using my token because I'm still authorized, and something on my profile changes. I got moved, I got terminated, my training expired, something happened. That token doesn't know that. It's out there in the world pre-authorized. Radiant can recognize that change happen and then send an API alert to the access control layer saying this user who has an open session that was authorized on this data, his data has changed to these new values. And then the policy decision point can make a decision on whether it wants to reauthorize the user, kill the session. It can interrupt that token in mid-lifespan based on a change that's detected on the back end because we can push that all the way back out to the edge. So that's a real, we're finding that customers when they realize that now, because some tokens last 24 hours. So you terminate me at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm downloading company information until 8 the next morning, unless I can actually reach out and kill that session. So we give you those options. Yep. Any other questions? All right. Well, I think I don't know if I'm between you and lunch or not, or lunch has already happened, but